Full shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, just some social shit for everyone, you know what I'm saying? Like, I made this be myself, so hear me. Woo! I mean, like, we can pull that clown shit away. This some real shit for you. I'm spazzing right now, so listen, let's go. Yeah. It's in their bones, the thoughts and harmony for the love of the money. Then fall victim for the cookie, then turn pussy, it's lonely. You said you hold it down when life get rough, we're here now, so show me. We move them losses to them wins. Heavy pounds, we make it ends meet. Converse of only a few who make me feel like I be 10 feet.
What's going on, people, man? It's G. We are back in the building, man. I hope we're all well, man. The new season is soon upon us, man. We've been waiting all summer for, the new season to begin. We've had the Euros. We've had, of course, the Copa America, all of the transfer news and, all of that, all that kind of good stuff. Well, I say good stuff, but for Liverpool, there's not really been much actually going on. But I said, I've done my, season predictions in terms of where I think everybody's going to finish in the table. So make sure you guys check that out. Make sure you watch that video and you'll see where I've placed all of your teams, all the 20 teams in the Premier League, who I've got as champions, who I think is going to finish in that top 4 race and, mid-table, Europa League and relegation. So make sure you guys check that out. And as I always say, man, guys, please make sure you do smash that like, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you're sharing this video out. I want to get this out to as many Liverpool supporters as I possibly can. Now, let's talk about the expectations for Liverpool this season. So in this video, I'm going to be going through quite a few things, quite a few bits and bobs. So we're going to take a look, of course, at Arne Slot, how he's done, so far this season, so far in the preseason, should I say, taking a look at some of the young players, potentially coming through, taking a look at the players I think are going to do well, players I think are not going to do so well, my surprise player, one to watch for the season, and one player that I, feel that may not necessarily do as well as people may actually think. But without further ado, let's kind of dive into it. So, Arne Slot, obviously coming in after Jurgen Klopp. So, of course, as we know, that was always going to be like a big thing, in terms of following on from the former Liverpool manager, the guy who won the Premier League for the first time in 30 odd years, got himself a Champions League as well. And won, of course, all those various other cups and stuff like that, FA Cup, League Cup, Super Cup, Club World Cup, all of these kind of cups, that he was able to pick up along the way. Listen, you guys already know my thoughts, in regards to Jurgen Klopp. I don't want to dive too much into that, but, by the last 2 to 3 years, I did want a change of manager. And now we've got in, Arne Slot. And I think looking at Arne Slot, in a general sense, I think from what we've seen so far, and again, we can only judge what we have seen, I can't read into the future, but from what we have seen so far, I think it's been okay. I can't really complain too much, I know we've got the transfer stuff, and listen, I'm doing this video on the 12th of August. So listen, by the time this video is posted out, I don't know what's going to potentially, happen in terms of the transfer side of things. Things may change, but just in regards to, Slot himself, I think even the way that he's come in, listen, we don't know the man. I don't know the man personally. I don't know what he's like behind closed doors, but everything that we have been able to see, the things that he has said, I can't lie, I've kind of liked it. Do you know what I mean? Like, he hasn't given me anything to necessarily sit here and say, nah, I'm not really feeling it, if I'm being totally honest with you, or nah, he's not really the guy for me, and etc., etc. So I think first impressions, I'll say this, has been pretty good. A solid 7.5 out of 10. I'll be honest, man. And I didn't think that was going to happen, especially with a manager that I didn't know too much about. Of course, as I said before, whatever I think about Klopp, it's still a massive job that he's coming into. So ultimately, how is he going to be able to handle that? I think, in terms of the way he speaks to the media, and, that side of things is obviously one side. And listen, throughout the season, we're going to see a lot more of how he actually handles and deals with the media. But ultimately, when we are looking at it, on the face of it, that side of it looks pretty calm. And then, of course, we got obviously the way that he plays football. You listen, as I said, and we'll get into that, the way that he does play football, for me, it's the way I would prefer to see, you know, my team playing football. Obviously there's a few bits and bobs that might need, you know, fixing, might need, you know, a bit of sorting out, but you know, ultimately, like I said, man, first impressions pretty good, man, pretty good. So I think he's in for an interesting season is probably, you know, what I will say to that. Now onto the style of play. So when we're looking at, of course, Liverpool's style of play, you can see there. Listen, I've said this quite a few times. You know, I wanted, you know, Roberto De Zerbi to be, you know, the manager of Liverpool Football Club, because I felt like the way he plays, his style of play, I think our players, of course, getting in some more players, but you know, we've got the players to basically have a foundation for that. And I like De Zerbi football, regardless of what people think. I really, really like it. Now, obviously, we've got in Slot, and he, to be honest, to me, he plays pretty. He has like a mixture. It's almost like he's got this almost like, to me, he's got this like blend of, it's like Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp. Look, Pep Guardiola in terms of, you know, when we're in possession, you know, how he wants to have that, you know, level of control. You know, I know how the, you know, where we build up through the back, you know, through the middle and everything like that. He wants to have that level of control. Then you've got that intensity, you know, with Jurgen Klopp, you know, in terms of how the team presses, you know, it's especially in certain areas of the pitch. And then, of course, we got that De Zerbi of playing out from the back, putting your foot on the ball, you know, enticing the opposition, you know, and not being afraid to pop it around at the back. I think like that's kind of a big thing, you know, that I've noticed anyway throughout the preseason games, you know, that Liverpool have played. And of course, he's been undefeated, you know, in the, well, unless you count the Preston game behind closed doors, then he's only had that one defeat. But in terms of from the tour onwards, you know, we've been playing some decent football. I definitely couldn't say otherwise. We have been playing some decent football. I like the way that Liverpool, the thing is, I like the way that we play, but a key thing that I've said many, many a time is that the way that Liverpool play, you need the exact profiles. Hence why I've been so on, we need signings. I know everybody's like, oh, but we've got this player and we've got that player, and you know, this guy can do this and that guy can do that. And I get it. I hear all of that, and I understand it, I guess, to, you know, to some degree. But ultimately, for me anyway, in my personal opinion, I just see it as, when you play this kind of style of football, you do need exact profiles. In Klopp's kind of style, you don't need exact profiles. You can kind of get away with having different types of profiles, i.e., you can have a Wijnaldum in your team who was a different type of player, completely different type of player, you know, playing for Newcastle and, you know, was it Feyenoord or PSV, you know, prior to that, and for Holland. And then when it comes to Liverpool, plays a completely different way. You can have that. You can do those kind of things just because of the style of play that Jurgen Klopp had, in my opinion. And, you know, there's various other players, you know, in the team that it doesn't really matter kind of necessarily who's in there, you know, so to speak, because he's going to get them kind of doing the same job. And as long as they can do that, as we saw with the season where we finished, you know, 5th, you know, when players can't necessarily reach the physical level, then that's kind of it. Everything else can be fine, you know, the technical side of things, but the physical level, you know, is really, really important. When I look at Arne Slot and the way that, you know, he wants a Jota to, you know, drop deep, you know, certain times, which then allows for the two inside forwards or inside inverted wingers, whatever you want to call them, allows for them to almost play as split strikers, you know, at times, where he's got the number 10, whether it's a Harvey Elliott, Szoboszlai, you know, picking up those pockets of space, whether they drift out wide, you know, to receive the ball, you know, the fullbacks, you know, on the left hand side, kind of either bombing up or trying to get infield, you know, to kind of mix it in the middle. The centre backs, the way they split and have the goalkeeper, you know, almost acting as that third centre back at times, and the way that he has to be patient. He has to be comfortable on the ball 100%, but he also has to be a little bit patient with, you know, the way that he kind of plays as well. So there's quite a lot, you know, in and around that. You know, in terms of the style of play, there are things and there is a base, and you can see that he's been able to implement his style. And I think the only reason why he's been able to implement his style is because we already had some of the players. And I think some of these players, whether they can do it or not, of course, remains to be seen. But we already had a base and foundation to be able to play that style. Hence why I wanted De Zerbi so much, because we have the base. It's literally evidence right there. I don't need to come with my agendas. And again, it doesn't matter because we've got Slot. But you can see we have the base to do that exact type of football. Of course we do. Now, and as I said, of course, it then it's going to be a little bit wishy-washy in terms of, okay, maybe this guy's not good enough to do this. Yes, fair enough. And of course, this is where you then need those certain upgrades, in certain types of positions to then say, okay, I need X and Y player because in order for this to work, I'm going to need that type of player, whether it's a Zubamendi, I don't know whether we're going to get him in or not, but these are the types of players that he's kind of, looking at and looking for, and potentially looking at some more signings. I think once Liverpool get that, potentially my early season prediction, hopefully you guys have watched it, maybe it would have changed, by that kind of point. But again, it's all about waiting to see. But at least he's been able to implement. We can see what he's trying to do. We saw the goals that one of the goals that Luis Diaz scored against Sevilla at Anfield, very reminiscent of one of the goals I believe we scored against Arsenal during the pre-season tour. Patterns of play, repetitive. That's something that I felt that we were lacking, or we have been lacking for quite some time, under the previous regime, is that everything kind of seems a little bit scattered. No two goals are really the same, which I guess can give you, which I've always thought Liverpool have had this kind of unpredictability about them, which is what catches teams off guard the most. And listen, clearly it worked, to some kind of degree, but when it doesn't work, at times you're just like, okay, I need something different now. We need something a bit more assured, so to speak. But again, listen, we've still got to wait and see, as the season kind of progresses, as to, what happens, how things are going to pan out, and etc. But again, like I said before, in talking about Arne Slot, I've got no real problems. It's just more about profiles now. For me, now I'm really looking at the profile of players. Does this type of player suit us? Certain players might be really, really good players out there, but are they the right type of player? Are they the guys that that we necessarily need, even though they might be a good player themselves? Now I'm looking at that a lot more closely, whereas before I just wanted good players because it's like, well, as long as they're good, they should be able to kind of work it out. But listen, we'll wait and see. But for me, style of play at the moment, like I said, I'll give it again another 7.5. Now on to contracts. Yeah, this is obviously, as I said, listen, I'm doing this video on the 12th. Things could change in the next 3 or 4 days. We don't really know. And I'm hoping by the time I post this video out that it would have changed. But ultimately, we've got 3 of our biggest players, 3 of our best players in the team whose contracts all run out come at the end of the season. And we know in January, if they still haven't signed a contract, they can talk to clubs outside of the Premier League, which obviously brings its own problems. We've got the Real Madrids, the PSGs, Saudi. There's so many different other, teams and continents and all this kind of stuff who are going to be looking at these 3 players. You've got the best, in my opinion, the best attacker. You've got the best defender. You've got, one of the best fullbacks out there. So to say that all 3, I've mentioned this before, for me, it's like, I get it, old regime and all of that, but still a level of negligence. And the sheer fact that up till now, they still haven't signed, I'm not saying it's a cause for concern, so to speak, but it's definitely something that I look at and think you really need to get this sorted out, excuse me, as soon as possible. Because if you don't get this sorted out as soon as possible, that might create more problems as the season kind of rumbles on, especially if Liverpool don't start off well or they're not doing so well in the league and stuff like that. It creates even more doubt, because then these 3 players, what do you then really have to kind of entice them to stay? Now, out of the 3, I would probably say Trent, to me, seems the most likeliest to actually stay at Liverpool Football Club. It's his boyhood club. He's the vice captain of the team, and I know, well, from what I've heard, he wants to, captain the team, hopefully one day. And it makes sense. As I said, it's his boyhood club, right? But ultimately, if we don't get those kind of things sorted out, like I said, it could create a little bit of a problem. So this is where we do need to just make sure that we're getting these kind of things sorted out. Salah and Virgil, I don't really know. Virgil probably second likely. And Salah, I just think with him, it's just more of a case of, I feel like he's just going with the flow. I'll be honest. I feel like he's generally just going with the flow, and he's like, I'll sign out if I want to sign, whatever. But then this is where it then comes on Liverpool and how they kind of see things. Maybe they're looking at it and thinking, you know what? We want to kind of give you a new deal, but in terms of Salah and Virgil van Dijk, we want to give you a new deal, but ultimately, let's just see how you do it for a little bit of part of this season. Let's see how you start off the season and stuff like that. You don't want to give someone a new deal. All of a sudden, Virgil breaks his leg. What? Do you get me? Touch wood, but just crazy. And it's Liverpool, man. Like these kind of weird things always seem to happen to us, like at the wrong time. So yeah, I not that I get it, because I still think that you shouldn't be in this, but not with three players. One, you can be like, okay, if it was just Salah, for example, you say, oh, okay, fair enough. Salah at the end of the day, kind of thing. But when you've said you've got three of your best players, we're not talking about like the Nabbies who are never here, Oxlade Chamberlains, the Thiagos, the Hendersons. We're not talking about those type of players, We're talking about players who are, this is literally the three players on the team sheet. These are in your first 11. All three players are going to be on your team sheet more often than not. Did you get what I'm trying to say? And we don't know whether they're going to stay or not. So listen, we'll wait and see, in regards to that. But I do think it's something that it just needs to be resolved either way. I don't really care how it gets resolved. I don't really care when it gets resolved. I just think it does, ultimately need to be resolved fairly soon. But listen, man, let's wait and see on that. Now, looking at the young players in the team, I'm not going to go through literally every single one. Well, if I can remember them, then I would. But obviously, you can see here, this is the League Cup final from last season. You can see, look, Jarell Quansah, Stefan Bajcetic, Connor Bradley, Elliot McConnell, Jaden Dans, Bobby Clark, Ben Doak, Lewis Kumas, and Trey Nyoni. All the young players. And there's obviously other ones who are not even listed in this photo. Now, from what we've heard in regards to Arne Slot and how, he is with the young players, it seems like they also get a chance, moving into next season, which is obviously good. You want to be able to, for me, obviously, I only want the good ones to play anyway. But if he does feel that, there are ones like a Trey Nyoni or someone of that kind of ilk who he feels, okay, you know what, they're good enough, man. They're good enough to, to play. They're good enough to, get themselves, in the team or in and around the team. Of course, we're not going to rush them. We're not going to push them through if we don't need to. And I think that's also key. I know we all speak about our young players and stuff like that. Me personally, I don't think there's that many good ones, so to speak. Trey, obviously, you can tell has got, immense talent, straight off the rip in terms of the way that Arne Slot wants to play. I feel like he's kind of got that, in his locker. But when we are looking at, someone like, Ben Doak or Bobby Clark, for example. Now, I know these are two players who might potentially be going out on loan or even permanent deals, as we've seen, with someone potentially like a Bobby Clark, James McConnell. These guys might be leaving. For me, excellent. I love that. I absolutely love that. Why are you hoarding players? If they're not good enough for Liverpool Football Club, guess what? Let them, first and foremost, from the player side, let them go out and have their career. Let them go out and play some football. There's no point keeping all of these. Like, you can't have this amount of players who you believe are good and just sitting on the bench. It doesn't make any sense. And let's be honest, most, if not all of them, are like, other than say Quansah and Bradley, the rest are not even touching the bench for majority of the season. And I'm including Stefan Bajcetic in that as well. Whether we sign a midfielder or not. So if these guys are not even touching the bench and they're going to be out of the squad completely for weeks on end at times, then what do you do? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Now, where you got to realize Klopp only played all of these young players because of injury. I know for a fact we wouldn't have seen none of these players if we didn't have the injury list that we had. If all of these players weren't out and we were like, we just need to rotate. These guys are going to have to, pull through. Now, I'm not saying they didn't do well. I'm not saying that they didn't play, pretty decent in some games, but ultimately you can kind of see and you can kind of tell with some of them, majority of them, to be honest, not really that good, to be honest with you. And what's I don't even know, but what's the percentage of all of these players being able to come through the Liverpool Academy or make it as first team? Like, come on, guys. I feel like it's almost like we feel we have to get this guy through. This guy needs to come through and this, that. I'm like, nah, it doesn't even work like that. I don't even know who does that. It's very rare. The top teams, it's very rare that you're going to see an influx of young players. Yes, you'll see the one or two. We see Oscar Bob, Phil Foden previously, Cole Palmer's. He didn't even make it through. He's gone to Chelsea to get game time and really show what he's about. Whether they regret it, I don't know. They just come off winning the Premier League. So do they really care? Probably not. But it's very difficult to be able to come through in some of these big teams. And I feel like we put then, way too much pressure. Oh, yeah, he's got to play, the shouts for Jaden Dans last season because we weren't happy with Nunes or, a Gakpo or Jota or whoever. And it's like, I get that. I get the frustration and I get they need the game time. But the reality is, are they really ready? And obviously you won't know until you throw them in. kind of thing, like we saw with Trey during the preseason, where he's put him in and you've seen that he's been able to flourish. But the reality is, are they going to be someone who you would rely upon at this current moment in time? Do we need to rely upon these kind of players? Or should we be looking at some of them, not all of them? Some can stay, of course, in and around the team. Obviously, Trey's young as well, so I don't know what the situation would be with someone like him anyway, in terms of loaning him out or, keeping him here. But I look at Bajcetic as one, someone who was able to get into the team at our lowest moment, then obviously got himself injured. The midfield got, somewhat better in terms of quality on the ball, and he was still injured throughout this time. Hasn't really played football at all for about a year and a half. And you'll say, like, oh, let's just throw him in or let's just keep him around the club. I don't feel like he even feels he's at that kind of stage, because ultimately, as I said, he might not even make the bench more time. So then if he's not making the bench, then what do you do with a player like this? It's all about trying to find that mix and blend. It's all well and good trying to get all of these young players, but let's be honest, guys, maybe only a few of these guys. And to be honest, they're probably all waiting for like an injury crisis like we had in previous seasons in order for them to be able to get through. So yeah, that's kind of how I see in terms of the young players. But like I said, if the manager, not even me, if the manager feels that they're good enough, throw them in. You know what I mean? Throw them in. So moving on to, as I mentioned before in the intro, 3 players that I think are going to do, reasonably well in this new system with the new manager this season. First one up, obviously, we got Mo Salah. I think there was a lot of talk about Mo Salah, obviously, before Slot came in. A lot of people kept telling me what they thought a slot winger wanted to do. And of course, listen, it's all hypotheticals at the end of the day, all jokes aside. It is all hypotheticals. We don't really know, we didn't really know until we, were able to see, what his football was going to look like. But I think people doubting Mo Salah, of all the people anyways, you can doubt everybody else. Like the entire attack, you can doubt him. I don't know, man. When you're the only world-class attacker that you've got, for me, it was always going to be about Slot's going to have to find a way to fit him in. He ain't going to need to adapt too much. He's going to have to just figure out a way that, I can get Mo Salah in the team. It's a world-class attacker. I get it. He's had performances last year. I get all of that. But guess what? He's still the best attacker that we've got. So it almost, I'm not saying it negates. I'm not going to say it negates. But I will say it's definitely something that you look at and you say, listen, man, it's Mo Salah at the end of the day. The best attacker we've got, one of the world's best attackers. And we're going to say, yeah, we might not be able to fit him in. Let's try someone else. What, for the all the other kind of misfits? Nah, I'm not really hearing that. And to be honest, Slot hasn't heard that. Salah's played every single pre-season game, bar the second game that we had on the Sunday when we had the double header. Of course, he played in the first game. He played every single game. Why? Because he's the star man in the team. He is the star, well, especially in attack anyway, but he's the star man in the team. He is literally Liverpool's best attacker. He's probably going to get most of the goals, most of the assists. So listen, like I would have looked at Slot sideways and been like, you couldn't fit him in. Crazy. That's crazy. But listen, man, he's been able to do his thing. Next up, we've got Harvey Elliott. Now, excuse me. Obviously, this kind of more depends on if he's able to, get a starting spot. I think it's a very big season for him in terms of where he kind of places in within the squad. When you've been in and around, forget your age for 1 second. When you've been in and around the squad for so long, and you're still in and around the squad, you're not first teamer yet and stuff like that, and there hasn't really been a real pathway for you, like there was when, and I know I keep referring back to it, but like when we speak about Phil Foden. He was able to get in the team. And to be honest, with Pep, it's still in and around the team. But there was a pathway. When David Silva was coming towards the end, obviously, coincidentally, that's when Foden was, coming through as a first team squad player, kind of thing. Once he's now been phased out, you can see towards the back end, there was a succession plan. Let's start getting Foden into games. Let's get him used to playing with Kevin De Bruyne. Let's get him used to playing with David Silva, Bernardo Silva, and all these other, types of really, really good players, right? And then, of course, once David Silva leaves, we've got a Phil Foden anyway. He's primed and he's ready. They're doing the same thing with an Oscar Bob at this current moment in time. With Elliott, there hasn't really been a plan, in my personal opinion. It hasn't really been. It's been like wishy-washy. Last season, come off the bench more time. His best performances were when he was coming off the bench. So you were like, okay, yeah, all right, Fairs, you know, kind of thing, blah, 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 whatever, whatever. But I think when I'm looking at someone like Elliot, I think with his style of play, with his kind of, you know, ability on the ball and in those final thirds or drifting out to those kind of wide areas, I felt like with Klopp, it was because it wasn't so much about on the ball. Elliot doing all of that job would just didn't really make too much sense. Hence why I felt he would be better coming off the bench anyway, because then it's just really, I needed to get on and just do your thing. Whereas when you start games, it's like, no, we needed to be disciplined in this kind of area or in this kind of way. Now Slot has emphasized about how Liverpool are on the ball, killing with passes and all that kind of stuff. I feel like this is where Elliot could potentially shine. So yeah, I think for Elliot, it's going to be potentially a good season for him. I think again, this is all based on if he's able to get the game time and stuff like that. But I think for him, it should be a relatively good season. And last but not least, I've gone with Jarrell Kwanzaa. I've gone with Kwanzaa because I just think that with the way that I feel Slot wants to play, I think that this will benefit someone like a Kwanzaa. Again, another guy who, even forgetting how high, and you know what, actually, one thing I didn't mention about the style of play, and this obviously pertains to the defense, right? We haven't spoken about how high or low Liverpool's line is. That was one of the main things that we used to speak about. Lines too high. Why are we always getting caught out? This, that, and the third, blah, 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 all of that. We haven't even spoken about that. We haven't even spoke like in any way, whether it's negative, positive, like it, don't like it. We haven't even spoken about it. Kind of tells you volumes. And this is where I think someone like a Kwanzaa, who is in that kind of mold of a Matip in terms of loves bringing the ball out, can dribble, and I think he's actually a bit better than Matip on the ball, decent passer of the ball as well. I think he's going to, you know, generally thrive this season. I'll be honest with you. And listen, man, he might be taking the place of another player, you know, potentially. So again, we'll have to wait and see, you know, in regards to that. But I think he's going to have a good season. And if he can command a place next to Virgil van Dijk, listen, man, he deserves it. You know, last season, he really did surprise me. So I think this season he's going to have, you know, he's going to kick on, you know, from here, close to that England call up as well, as we saw. I think with Lee Carsley now being the new England manager, that might change, you know, in terms of getting into the team, because we know centre-back wise, it's a bit shaky, you know, with England. So yeah, man, definitely something to see. So we've gone the ones with, it's going to look a bit funny in the light. It's going to look a little bit funny in the light. Obviously, I don't know, of course, I'm only really just guessing just based upon everything we've seen with these kind of players, right? But I look at Konate. Listen, I'm not saying that he isn't going to do a job, but if I had to pick between Konate and Kwanzaa, I'm picking Kwanzaa. For this type of football, I'm picking Kwanzaa. For Klopp's type of football, I'm picking Konate. And I think that kind of tells you all you need to kind of really know. Also with Konate, it is a lot about the injuries, you know, and how inconsistent he can be with his fitness. I think that's a kind of worry for him going forward. Obviously, if it's something that can be eradicated and it's done and dusted and, you know, whatever, then great. Because Konate is actually a good defender. I've said this many times. He's a good defender, got great recovery pace, strong as a flipping ox. Did you get what I'm trying to say? Like, he's somewhat decent in the air. He's not good at passing, but I guess it's passable. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, in a team that didn't focus on that, it's calm. I feel like in a team that it does focus on that, he doesn't look like, he's very awkward on the ball. He's very, very awkward. And I think with the way that Slot wants to play, you can't really be awkward. I'll be honest with you. So yeah, that's the way I'm kind of looking at it, you know, for someone like Konate. Next up, we've got Robbo. I think with Robbo, it's just more about, I think physically I don't know, you know, I'm not going to say he's declining physically, because I feel like maybe he's just kind of maintained it. Again, it's just more about the injuries, and again, about the way that Slot wants to play. I think, again, profiles, as we spoke about in the style of play, the way that Slot wants to play, for me, Tsimikas is a better fit for that. Now, do I want an upgrade on Tsimikas? 100%. That's why I feel like Robbo, for me, should just be someone who obviously will play the odd game here and there. He might even play a big game against Manchester City away and stuff like that, just because he knows the game. He knows, you know, the intensity that we might potentially need. But as an overall, I'm preferring to go with someone like a Tsimikas type of player. Now, I want an upgrade on Tsimikas anyway, but I prefer that type of player, so to speak. Robbo, I think, listen, in some games where we might just need the energy and stuff like that, yeah, you can bring him on. But in terms of the style of play, yeah, for me, yeah, I just think that Robbo should be now starting to get reduced minutes, if I'm being totally honest with you. And again, also injury record as of recently just seems like it's starting to get a little bit shaky. Picking up injury. I know that he got the injury away with Scotland. I get all of that, but he's starting to pick up injuries regardless of anything. You know, he's missed the whole US preseason tour. You know, it's listen, man. Sometimes it's not a coincidence. Sometimes it's just staring you in the face. And I think that, I mean, I'm not saying you can't keep him around, but I wouldn't care if he got sold. Like, he's not one of the ones I'm like, oh my goodness, you have to keep him. For me, I'm like, this signifies to me your statement of intent. We want to play this way. We can't have you around. And to me, absolutely fine. I've got no problems, you know, with that. Last but not least, you knew I couldn't do one of these without, you know what I mean, talking about Darweezy. I think that Jota looks anyway to be a better fit for this system. That's what I'll say in regards to Darwin Núñez. I just think that, forget, you know, the game, he's only been here for how long? So I'm not really even concerned about that. I just think that Jota's a better fit for the system in itself. I know we've only seen 45 minutes. There needs to be more evidence, of course, but because we've seen so much evidence of a Diogo Jota, I feel like, why would you realistically change that, you know, so to speak? You know, I know he wants Darwin Núñez to, you know, play up front, be the main, well, to be the number 9, you know, within the team, within the squad. I get all of that, but I just think that, why would you change that for a guy who's not as consistent with his finishing when you have someone who is very consistent? We saw the goal against Sevilla, you know, that Diogo Jota scores. Left foot, right foot. This guy is lethal in and around the box. Very, very, he's going to score more than, you know, more than not, you know, kind of thing. And I just think that level of consistency in your finishing is the reason why, or it's one of the reasons why, you know, as to why I would be picking Jota every single day of the week. And I just think that Núñez, it's going to be, yes, he's going to play games, of course he will, but I think more of, for me, I would be using him the same way Klopp used Elliott last season, more of an impact player. Yes, he's going to play the odd game, Southampton, you know, all these kind of teams. You know, maybe if Jota's a bit tired, you can play, you know, Darwin Núñez, cool. But as an overall, for me, my best team doesn't include, you know, Darwin Núñez moving forward. So it's just really about, you know, how we kind of see that, you know, in that kind of regards. But again, listen, things may change throughout the season. Darwin always seems to have this purple patch at some point in the season, so that could be something that could potentially work. But yeah, let's just wait and see in regards to that. But he's definitely one player I look at and think, I don't know about you, you know. I really, really, really don't know about you. Now we move on to a player who I think is going to kind of surprise us this season. Not someone I thought would, but from seeing him in the last couple of games in the preseason, and again looking at the way that Slot wants to play. And remember, the only evidence I've got is preseason at this moment in time. And again, transfers may potentially change that, and etc. But I just think if Gravenberch can keep himself fit and in and around, whether Liverpool sign a midfielder or not, I think he could be someone that Slot might potentially turn to more often than not. Whether it's off the bench, whether it's starting certain games, I think the way that he likes to play is quite reminiscent of how he used to kind of play when he was at Ajax. And I think if you can get that Gravenberch, I think that's when he will then surprise a few people. Not the Gravenberch who you're trying to plot out on the left centre midfield, trying to do whatever, like all that running around. He don't want to do all of that stuff, man. That ain't the type of player that he is. So I think he's going to be someone who's going to surprise us potentially this season, I think anyway. Good on the ball, decent passer, stuff like that. Can find pockets of space really well, and he can glide. That's one thing I do like about Gravenberch, and what I will say, he's like he can glide through the pitch. I think that might be very useful for us moving forward, especially in that defensive midfield position. Having someone who's able to really do that and comfortable, I think he's one of the best that we have at actually doing that. I think he's better than like a Szoboszlai potentially at doing something like that. I think maybe, you know, Szoboszlai is a little bit different with the way he does it. Let me say that. Let me not say better, just different. But I prefer the way, and stylistically, the way that, you know, Ryan Gravenberch does it. So yeah, I think he's going to be someone who's going to surprise us. Flattered to deceive, man. You guys can see him on your screen. I think Jones is going to be in for, I think it's going to be a mixed season from Jones. And the fact that I think it's going to be a mixed season from Jones, I don't feel like that's a good thing. I don't feel like that's a good thing. Similar to Harvey Elliott, I almost feel like you guys, him especially, you've been in and around the squad for so long. And big up to Beery, because I think he mentioned this, that when you're like with certain players, you almost know like they've got a trait about them. I feel like with Jones, I don't there's just no real place for you here. Like it's difficult because again, I think he can be a good squad rotation kind of option. But if you had to pick your midfield three, let's say whether you signed someone or didn't sign someone, is he included in that midfield three? I don't know, man. I'm not 100% convinced. I'll be honest with you. I still think he's got a little bit to learn about this style of play as well, which everybody does. But I think especially that midfield area is so key, by the way. So I think he's got a little bit to learn in that kind of regards, where I'm kind of looking at him and I'm like, I don't know, I don't know. I think it's just going to be a real mixed bag from him. We're going to get some good performances, not so good. He's going to be out of the team for a couple of weeks here potentially, and there. And is that what he's looking for moving forward? New manager, and it's the same old kind of ish. I don't really know, man. I'm not, as I said, I'm not 100% convinced on Jones at the moment. He hasn't shown me enough. And I thought he was going to be one of the ones who would show me, but to me, he hasn't shown me enough to me to sit here and really rest my laurels, whether we signed a midfielder or not, to say Jones has to play kind of thing. Again, in some games, yes, you can play Curtis Jones, no problem. As an overall, I don't know about that. I really, really, really don't know about that, man. So we move on to one to watch, and I think it's going to be Trey. I think it's then generally going to be Trey. I think, again, because we're not relying on so much physicality. I'm not saying, but listen, I'm not saying that that's not something that we need to have, within the team. But it's not a main point, for the team. It's not the main thing. Like you need to be able to run faster, run harder, be strong, this, that, and the block, all of that kind of rubbish, right? I feel like someone like Trey will thrive in a system like this. Forget how the team do. I just think he could thrive in a system, like this. And from what we have seen of someone like Trey, I know, yes, he needs to bulk up and stuff like that. But I think word to Savage, I think he mentioned it on a previous stream about when people say bulk up, I'm not asking him to be like bulky. I just think like a Gravenberch kind of thing. I feel like you can be like that, that kind of slim build, but still able to do what he's, obviously he's still young. He's 17 years of age, and he only just turned 17 not too long ago. So he still needs to, he even just needs to get older. And once he starts to fill out in general, I feel like he'd be, absolutely calm. So yeah, I think Trey's definitely going to be, one player that, I think is going to be. Going to be pretty good. It's going to be pretty good, this season. And again, depending on if he stays here or not. This is based on if he stays at Liverpool Football Club, not goes on loan or whatever. I know they're going to use him in the under 21s and stuff like that. But I feel like he's going to get the call ups. He'll play these cup games and things like that. I don't want to place too much expectation on him, so to speak. I don't want to say, yeah, play these games, play that game. I don't really care about all of that. I just think because he's so young, he's only 17. And I get it, limiting mile, 17, doing it. I get that, but he ain't that level, which is very evident. Fair enough. But I just think for Liverpool, especially in the area that he plays in, I think he could definitely be, someone we could potentially be using. Now we go on to expectations, man. Expectations. Listen, as I said, you saw in my Premier League predictions where I expected Liverpool to finish, which is in third place. I think, listen, new manager coming in, new style of, a different style of play. Got some similarities, of course, to Klopp, but a different style of play, so to speak. I just think that at the moment, and this is based on the fact of the 12th of August, no signings. I just don't think the squad is good enough. I'll be honest with you to win the Premier League anyway. So I've got them down in finishing third. Cup competitions, it's hard to predict those. And I'm not going to say we should be favourites in any of those. I'll be honest with you because, well, in two of them, the domestic ones, Manchester City and Arsenal are in it. So it's basically like the Premier League and it's cup competitions. Anyone catches you off on the wrong day, it's long. You might play a weakened team. They might play a stronger team. Like it could be all crazy. Champions League, I think there are better teams out there, better equipped as well in the Champions League. So yeah, I think I don't see us picking up any trophy this season, but I think it will be more about a learning curve for the team, for the players. We're going to excite at times. We're going to do, have really good games where you're like, oh my goodness, we might even be top of the league at one point in the season, which I think is actually going to happen. We'll be top of the league at some random point in the season. But I just think as an overall, I think this squad, when I look at it, even right now with no signings, and I know that's funny because, you know, all these other clubs have been signing players. I think if you just look to the squad, of course, let's say everyone's fit in every single squad, every single game. I just look at it and think, yeah, I think third best team at best. I think that's how I look at it. I still think Arsenal, Manchester City are just that little bit better. I'm not saying it's a massive gap. I don't think it's a massive gap at all. I just think they're just better teams. Around Europe, I think, you know, your Bayerns, your Real Madrids, these guys. And you know what? I say Bayerns and Real Madrids, obviously Man City, Arsenal going to be included in that. But there's just, you know, just like certain teams, you'll just like Atalanta last season. You come up against these weird teams and you're like, yeah, they just stifled us completely, you know, and it's just one of those kind of things. So that's how I kind of see it for the season. But in terms of like my actual expectations, I think it is really that. I think don't drop below third. For me, that's bare minimum. That's what I expect the team to do. So if you finish third or above, for me, you've over exceeded my expectations. Style of play, though, man, I just need that to be, you know, on point. I just really like for me, that's kind of important. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, I want to win trophies, but I don't expect the team to do so. And I think expectations versus what you realistically want are two completely different things. Everyone always says, yeah, we should be doing this. No. Well, I say no. If you expect the team to do so, fair enough, cool, then do your thing. I don't expect the team to win anything next season. I just expect them to finish third, have good football, enjoy the football that we're actually watching. I can finally sit there and not feel like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is such an eyesore, you know, when I'm watching these games, you know, kind of thing. And it used to just frustrate me watching Liverpool, you know, over the last couple of years. Like, just frustrates me watching. I'm like, the football ain't even that good. You know what I mean? We're getting lucky. All of these kind of like, but then you start inventing new things as to what you don't like. Oh, why is the microwave all hot? You know, them dumb kind of things. Those kind of things start to set in. So for me personally, as I said before, I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking, yeah, I think that will be what my expectations are. Of course, I hope you over exceed those. Go for the quad if you can go for the quad. I don't like whatever. I don't really care. But for me, I just think finishing third for me is a realistic expectation for this team. And because really and truly, it's not like we've done a Chelsea, which is probably a little bit stupid, where you're almost ripping up a lot of things and you're changing this. You've had to change manager after 1 year. So one style of play previous to the other style of play. Now you've got a new style of play, new sets of players. Get this player out, get this player in. It's all very mumbo jumbo over on that side of the map. So when I then look at, you know, someone like Liverpool, that's why I'm like, you know what? I think that we've still got the nucleus of the team, of the squad, in terms of the principles as well. I think, yeah, third place. And I think we'll enjoy. I think this will be the first season in ages I'll actually enjoy watching the football. But of course, let's just wait and see. But guys, that is the end of my expectations for Liverpool this season. Let me know, of course, where you think Liverpool are going to finish in the league this season, or just what you kind of expect, you know, in a general sense for Liverpool. How do you kind of see things? Do you think I'm being too harsh? Do you think I'm being over the top? Do you think I'm spot on? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section, people, and I will get back to you. And let's hope that Liverpool can compete this season, but let's just wait and see. I'll catch you guys on the other side. Peace.